They told me I was going somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, somewhere that would take care of me. The moment the door locked behind me, I realized it wasn't care. It was containment. So I started writing everything down. Hi, everyone. Grace here. Before we go further, make sure you're subscribed and tell me where you're watching from. This already doesn't sit right with me. When care starts sounding like control, I stop trusting people fast. My name is Eleanor Braddock. I'm 70 years old, and up until 3 weeks ago, I lived alone in a narrow white house on Alderwick Lane with peeling shutters and a kitchen that still smelled faintly of nutmeg and old cast iron. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My husband, Charles, built the back porch with his own hands, and even now, if you stepped on the third plank from the railing, it creaked in a very specific way, like it remembered him. After Charles died, things didn't collapse all at once. They shifted, quietly, like a chair being dragged across the floor in another room. My niece, Paige Renner, started visiting more often. At first, she brought things, homemade soup, though it always tasted store-bought, little jars of quince preserve, a lavender sachet she insisted would help me sleep. Then she started bringing questions. Did you remember to take your pills? You left the stove on last week, right? I hadn't, but she said it so confidently I almost believed her. Her husband, Martin, had a different approach. He spoke softly, like a man in a waiting room. Always reasonable, always patient. Ellie, he'd say, leaning against the kitchen counter like he belonged there. At your age, it's not about independence. It's about safety. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. Men like him rarely do. And then there was Blake, their son. He didn't talk much when he came over, but he looked. That's what I noticed. He looked at the house like it was already his, measured the hallway with his eyes, ran his fingers once along the edge of my writing desk, Charles's desk, and asked, too casually, "You still have all the papers for this place, right?" I started noticing patterns. Paige would mention something I forgot, and a few days later, Martin would repeat it, slightly altered, like a story being edited. Once she said I called her at midnight, confused about where I was. I hadn't called her at all. I checked my phone. No record. When I told her that, she smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. That's exactly what I'm worried about, Aunt Ellie. They began suggesting things. Small at first. Maybe we should organize your medications. Then, you shouldn't be driving alone. Then, what if something happens and no one's there? Every suggestion sounded like concern. Every step moved me slightly out of my own life. The day it happened, Paige said we were going to see a specialist. Just to be sure everything's fine, she said, helping me into her car like I was already fragile. I brought my purse, my keys, and out of habit, I slipped a small pencil into the lining. I used to be a court recorder for nearly 30 years. Old habits don't disappear. They wait. We didn't drive to any clinic I recognized. The roads got narrower, the houses farther apart. Then the trees closed in, and the building appeared without warning. 3 stories. Faded brick. Windows too narrow. A sign near the entrance read Ashcroft Residence in thin, polite lettering that tried very hard to sound like a hotel. This is just temporary, Paige said quickly when I didn't move to get out. They'll observe you, adjust your medications, make sure you're safe. Safe. That word again. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and overcooked cabbage. A woman with pale hair and a name tag that read Nora Keene greeted us with a smile that felt rehearsed. Papers were exchanged. I noticed Paige already had them signed. That's when I understood. This hadn't been arranged today. This had been decided long before I got in that car. "I'm not staying," I said, calmly, clearly. Paige squeezed my hand. Too tight. "Just for a little while." They took my phone. For safekeeping. My purse. My keys. They wrote down my belongings on a clipboard, though I noticed they skipped the ring I'd slipped into my mouth when no one was looking. It tasted like metal and memory. When the door to my room closed behind me, it didn't slam. It clicked. Soft. Final. I sat on the bed, felt the thin mattress dip under my weight, and for a moment, I let myself feel it. The betrayal, the insult, the cold realization that my own blood had decided I was easier to remove than to respect. Then I reached into the lining of my slipper, pulled out the pencil, found an old notebook tucked in the drawer, recipes, mostly, handwritten, and turned to the first empty page. Day 1. They lied about the stove. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to write. The first night in a place like Ashcroft doesn't feel real. It feels staged, like you've been placed inside someone else's routine and expected to follow along without asking why. The lights dimmed at exactly 9. Doors clicked shut one by one down the corridor. Somewhere, a television murmured through a wall, low and constant, like a voice you couldn't quite understand. I didn't sleep. The mattress was thin. The pillow smelled faintly of starch and something older, something like damp paper. I lay on my back and listened. Footsteps passed every hour. Soft-soled shoes, not rushed, not lazy, controlled, like people who knew they were being listened to. I waited until I was sure no one was coming, then pulled the notebook out from under the mattress. My pencil moved quietly. 9:42 p.m. Hallway, quiet. Staff rotation every 60 minutes. Door locks from outside. I paused, listening again. They assume we won't notice patterns. That part I underlined. By morning, I had decided something important. I was not going to behave like someone they could dismiss. Breakfast was served in a room that tried too hard to look cheerful. Yellow curtains, plastic flowers. A long table where people sat not quite together, not quite apart. I took my tray, scrambled eggs too pale, toast already cold, and something they called oatmeal but tasted like paste, and chose a seat near the end. That's where I met her. "You're new," she said without looking at me. Her name, I would later learn, was June Ellery. White hair pinned back too tightly, hands that trembled only when she wasn't paying attention. There was a teacup in front of her, chipped at the rim, and she held it like it was something important. "Yes," I said. "Apparently." She gave a small, humorless smile. "That's what they all say the first day." I didn't answer right away. I studied her instead. Her clothes were neat, not hospital-issued. That meant something. She hadn't been fully processed into the system yet. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "My family thinks I'm confused." June let out a quiet breath through her nose. "And are you?" "No." She nodded once, like she'd expected that answer. "Then don't argue. Not today." That caught my attention. Why not? Now she looked at me. Her eyes were sharp. Too sharp for someone who was supposed to be fading. "Because they write things down," she said. "And they don't write what you say. They write what they need." I felt something settle into place inside me. Not fear, recognition. "I used to write things down for a living," I said. "Court records." That changed something in her expression, just slightly. Then you already understand, she said quietly. The version that gets written becomes the truth. We ate in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence shared by people who had just agreed, without saying it out loud, to pay attention. After breakfast, they gathered us in a small room for what they called a wellness check. A young man with a clipboard, Caleb Ross, I remembered from the name tag, asked simple questions in a voice that was almost apologetic. "Do you know what day it is, Mrs. Braddock?" I gave him the correct answer. "Do you know where you are?" "Yes, Ashcroft Residence." "Do you know why you're here?" I paused just long enough to make it believable. My niece was worried about me. He wrote something down. I watched his hand, quick, efficient. But when he lifted the pen, I noticed something. He hadn't written what I said. He'd written, "Resident acknowledges need for supervision." That was the first time I understood how quickly a person could disappear without ever leaving the room. Later, back in my room, I wrote it down. Caleb Ross. Alters phrasing. Not exact record. Important. The afternoon passed slowly. Too slowly. I learned the sounds of the place. The way the radiator clicked twice before heating. The way one of the doors at the end of the hall scraped slightly against the floor when it opened. The smell of boiled rutabaga drifting in from somewhere around 3. At some point, a woman brought in fresh linens. She didn't say much, but she moved differently from the others. Less rehearsed, more aware. "Molly," she said when I asked her name. "Molly Harker." She changed the sheets quickly, efficiently, but her eyes flicked once, just once, to the notebook partially hidden under my pillow. She didn't say anything about it. Instead, as she smoothed the blanket, she leaned slightly closer and said, very quietly, "You'll want to keep that somewhere better." Then she stepped back, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at her. But I understood. That evening, I moved the notebook. Not under the mattress this time. Too obvious. Too easy to check. Instead, I folded a page carefully, tore out the written sections, and slid them into the lining of my house slipper. The rest of the notebook I left where it was, open to a recipe for lemon chess pie, written in a looping, careful hand that wasn't mine. If they looked, they'd see nothing unusual. If they didn't, I would keep writing. Before lights out, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened again. The same footsteps. The same rhythm. Only now I knew something I hadn't known the night before. I wasn't the only one paying attention, and that meant this place wasn't as quiet as they wanted it to be. By the third day, the place stopped pretending to be harmless. It wasn't anything obvious. No one shouted. No one dragged anyone down the hall. It was quieter than that. Cleaner. Which made it worse. I started noticing who disappeared. Not dramatically, not in front of everyone. Just gone. A chair empty at breakfast. A name no longer called during medication rounds. When I asked June about it, she didn't answer right away. She stirred her tea slowly, watching the surface like it might tell her something. "They get transferred," she said finally. "Where?" Another pause. Longer this time. "They don't tell us." That wasn't an answer. That was a warning. I wrote it down as soon as I got back to my room. Residents leaving without notice. Belongings not fully removed. Check laundry. So I did. The laundry room sat at the end of the hall, past a door that always stayed half open, like it didn't want attention. The smell hit first. Detergent, bleach, and something sour underneath. I moved slowly, like I belonged there. That's the trick. People don't question you if you look like you already know what you're doing. There were baskets stacked along the wall, names written in black marker, some fresh, some faded. I found one labeled E. Carver. June had mentioned her the night before, said she used to hum while she ate. The basket was still full, clothes folded, slippers tucked neatly underneath, a cardigan with one loose button. No sign of anyone coming back for it. I didn't touch anything, just looked, counted, memorized. When I turned to leave, someone was standing in the doorway. Caleb. He wasn't holding his clipboard this time. "You're not supposed to be in here," he said, but his voice didn't carry authority. It carried something else. Unease. "I was looking for fresh linens," I replied. He hesitated. His eyes moved past me to the baskets, then back again. "Those get handled by staff." "I see that." Another pause. Then quietly, almost like he regretted saying it the second it left his mouth. "You shouldn't ask too many questions your first week." There it was again. Not a threat. Not exactly. More like advice you give someone before something goes wrong. I nodded, like I understood less than I did. "Of course." He stepped aside to let me pass, but as I walked by, I noticed his hand tighten slightly against the doorframe. He was nervous. That meant he knew. Back in my room, I didn't write right away. I waited, listened, made sure I was alone. Then I pulled the paper from my slipper and added a new line. E. Carver. Belongings remain. No formal discharge observed. I underlined it once. Then, after a moment, I added, Caleb aware. Not aligned with system. Pressure visible. That afternoon, I met the cook. Her name was Joan Mercer, and she ran the kitchen like it was the only honest place left in the building. She didn't smile much, but she watched everything. When I came in during the lull between meals, she didn't ask why. "Coffee?" she said, already reaching for a small chipped demitasse cup. "Yes," I answered. It was stronger than anything they served at breakfast. Real coffee. Not whatever powdered substitute they pushed on the residents. "You're writing things down," she said without looking at me. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer immediately. She set the cup in front of me. "Good," she added. "Someone should." That was all she said, but it was enough. That evening during medication, I paid closer attention. The cups were handed out quickly, names called, pills swallowed, water followed. Routine. But one woman hesitated. "Those aren't mine," she said softly. The nurse, different one this time, I didn't catch her name, didn't even look at the pills. "They're what's prescribed." "I know what I take," the woman insisted, her voice trembling now. "These aren't—" "Take them," the nurse said, sharper this time. The room went quiet. I watched as the woman slowly lifted the cup, her hand shaking, and swallowed. No one said anything. Not June, not Caleb, not me. But I wrote it down. Medication discrepancies. Resistance overridden. Witnessed by multiple residents. I stared at the words for a long time after I wrote them. Because by then, the pattern wasn't just forming, it was tightening. And whatever this place really was, it wasn't just about keeping people safe. It was about making sure no one could prove they weren't. On the fourth day, my niece came back. They didn't warn me. They never do. Visits here are staged like interruptions, not reunions. I was sitting in the common room, pretending to read a gardening magazine about hydrangeas that would never survive the soil back home when I heard her voice. "Ellie? Too bright. Too careful." I looked up slowly, like it took effort. Paige stood near the doorway with Martin just behind her, hands folded neatly, as if this were a polite social call and not what it actually was. "Hello, dear," I said. She smiled, but it didn't hold. Her eyes moved around the room, checking who was watching, always aware of the audience. "How are you feeling?" she asked, sitting beside me, her hand already reaching for mine. "Clear," I said. That wasn't the answer she wanted. Martin stepped in smoothly. "That's good. That's very good." He pulled a chair closer. "The staff says you've been adjusting." Adjusting. Another word that meant nothing and everything. Paige opened her bag. Papers. Of course. "We just need to take care of a few things while you're here," she said gently. "Temporary arrangements, just in case." I didn't touch the folder. "What kind of arrangements?" "Oh, nothing serious," she replied quickly. "Just so we can help manage things. Bills, the house, little details you shouldn't have to worry about right now." Martin added, "It's about protecting you, Ellie." There it was again. Protecting. I let my hand rest on the paper but didn't open it. Instead, I tilted my head slightly, like I was trying to follow along. "I get tired," I said quietly. "Hard to focus." Paige relaxed. I saw it happen. A small drop in her shoulders. "Of course you do," she said softly. "That's why we're here." She slid the pen toward me. I picked it up, then set it back down. "Later," I murmured. "When I'm sharper." For a second, just a second, something flickered across her face. Irritation. Real, unfiltered. Martin noticed it too. He stepped in again, voice calm but firmer now. "Ellie, it's important we don't delay these things. Timing matters." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't soften it. "Then you should have told me the truth before bringing me here." Silence. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. Paige's grip tightened on her bag. "We did what was best." "No," I said. "You did what was convenient." Martin leaned back slightly, reassessing. Paige said nothing. Good. That meant I'd said enough. A nurse appeared not long after, too quickly for coincidence. "Visiting time is almost over," she said, with a polite smile that didn't include her eyes. Paige gathered the papers, slower this time, more careful. "We'll come back," she said, "when you're feeling better." I nodded. "Yes," I replied, "when I'm feeling better." They left without touching me again. I stayed in the chair a while longer, letting the room settle back into its quiet rhythm. June didn't look at me, but I could feel her attention. When I finally returned to my room, Molly was there, adjusting the curtains. "They brought papers," she said without turning. "Yes." "You didn't sign." "No." She nodded once. "Good." That was all. After she left, I took the pages from my slipper and added a new entry. Day 4, family attempted signature. Property transfer likely. Urgency increasing. I paused, then added one more line. They're running out of patience. I sat there for a long moment, pencil resting against the page, because now I understood something clearly. This wasn't about care. It wasn't even about control. It was about time. And they were trying to move faster than I could prove what they were doing. That meant I didn't have the luxury of waiting anymore. That same evening, everything shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it was the first time I saw proof that what I suspected wasn't just a pattern. It was a plan. Caleb found me. Not in the hallway, not in the common room. In the small side office near the medication station, the one no one ever used unless they had to print something. He stood there awkwardly, like he wasn't sure he should be talking to me at all. "You weren't supposed to see those baskets," he said quietly. I didn't touch anything, I replied. I know. That was the problem. He did know. He glanced over his shoulder before stepping closer. They've been asking about you. Who is they? He hesitated. Your family, and Mrs. Keene. Of course. I stayed calm. And what did you tell them? That you're cooperative. He swallowed. That you're adjusting well. I studied his face. Pale, tired, not cruel, just stuck. Why are you telling me this, Caleb? Another pause. Then he did something I didn't expect. He handed me a folded sheet of paper. I wasn't supposed to print this, he said. I didn't open it right away. I looked at him instead. Why now? Because... He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding it in for days. Because this isn't right. That was enough for me. I unfolded the paper. It was a system entry, clean, official, time-stamped. My name at the top. Eleanor Braddock. Status. Evaluation in progress. Projected outcome. Long-term placement recommended. Return to private residence, not advised. My eyes moved lower. Property management. External coordination pending. Family liaison. Paige Renner. Legal review initiated prior to intake. Prior, not after. Not because of anything I'd done here, before I ever walked through that door. For a moment, the room felt smaller, quieter, like something had just locked into place that couldn't be undone. They decided before I got here, I said. Caleb nodded. Yes. I read the line again. Return to private residence. Not advised. Not because I was incapable, because they needed it to be that way. Who wrote this? I asked. Mrs. Keene approved it, he said. But the request came from your family. They pushed for an expedited review. Expedited. Of course they did. I folded the paper carefully. Not rushed, not shaken, just precise. Does anyone else have access to this? I asked. Yes, administration, and... He hesitated. The legal consultant. Graham Wexler. I memorized the name. Thank you, Caleb. He looked at me like he expected something else. Maybe anger, maybe panic. I gave him neither. Instead, I said, You should go. He blinked. What? They'll notice you're gone. And if they think you're helping me, you won't be able to help anyone. That landed. He nodded slowly, then stepped back. But before he left, he said something under his breath. They're planning to move you. My eyes lifted. When? Soon, he said. North Wing. Then he was gone. I didn't go back to my room right away. I walked, slowly, like I always did, past the common room, past the dining hall, past the door that scraped slightly when it opened. North Wing was at the far end, locked, of course. But even from the hallway, you could feel the difference. Quieter, colder. No voices, no television, nothing. That wasn't where people recovered. That was where they were removed. I turned back without touching the handle. No need to draw attention. Back in my room, I waited. Listened. Then I pulled the papers from my slipper and added a new entry. System record confirms. Decision made prior to admission. Family-initiated legal process before intake. Outcome predetermined. I underlined that last part twice. Then I added one more line. North Wing to de-escalation. Timeline shortening. I sat there for a long time after writing that. Not thinking about fear, thinking about timing. Because now I knew something I hadn't known before. This wasn't just about keeping me here. It was about moving me somewhere worse before I could stop them. All right. This is where it gets serious. They didn't react to her condition. They built the story first, then placed her inside it. And that North Wing. I don't like the sound of that at all. What would you do in her place right now? Me? I wouldn't wait for the next move. I'd start breaking their plan before they finish it. They moved faster after that. Not openly. Not in a way you could point at and say, "There, that's the moment." But the air changed. Staff stopped lingering. Conversations cut off when I entered a room. Even June grew quieter, like she was measuring every word before letting it out. That's how you know pressure is building. Not by what people say, but by what they stop saying. The next morning, my name was called earlier than usual. "Medication review," the nurse said. Different nurse again. This one didn't bother pretending to be kind. I followed her into a smaller room near the back corridor. A table, 2 chairs, a locked cabinet. No windows. Caleb was already there, standing off to the side with his clipboard, not looking at me. "Sit," the nurse said. I did. She placed a paper cup in front of me. More pills than before. I didn't touch them. "These are new," I said. "They're adjusted," she replied. "Doctor's recommendation." "I haven't seen a doctor." "You don't need to," she said flatly. "Your chart has." That was new. I turned my head slightly toward Caleb. He didn't move, but I saw it. The smallest shift in his jaw. He knew. I picked up the cup, tilted it slightly, just enough to see the shapes inside. One capsule I didn't recognize. White. No marking. "I'd like to confirm these," I said calmly. The nurse's patience snapped, just a little. "You're not in a position to question your treatment, Mrs. Braddock." There it was again, that quiet attempt to redraw the line. I nodded slowly, then brought the cup to my lips, and didn't swallow. Years ago, I learned how to hold a word in my mouth until the exact right moment to release it. Turns out, pills aren't that different. I took the water, tipped my head back, and let them think I complied. The nurse watched, waited, satisfied. "Good," she said. "We'll monitor your response." Of course you will, I thought. Back in my room, I didn't sit down right away. I went straight to the small sink, turned the tap just enough, and let the pills slip quietly from my mouth into my hand. I dried them on a corner of the towel. Then I studied them. One I recognized. The other, I didn't. I wrapped them carefully in a piece of tissue and slid them into the lining of my slipper, next to the pages. Medication change. No physician present. Unknown capsule introduced. Forced compliance. I wrote it all down, every detail. Because now it wasn't just about documents or signatures. They were trying to make me easier to manage, and that meant I had less time than I thought. That afternoon, I found Joan again. She didn't ask questions when I walked into the kitchen, just poured coffee into that same chipped Dimitas cup and slid it across the counter. I placed the tissue-wrapped pills beside it. She didn't touch them right away. "New?" she asked. "Yes." She glanced toward the door, then leaned in slightly. "Don't take anything you don't recognize." "I don't plan to." She nodded once, then, quietly, "I'll ask someone I trust." That was more than I expected. "Thank you," I said. She waved it off. "Just don't make it obvious." Nothing here could be obvious. On my way back, I took the longer route, past the laundry room, past the common area, past the north wing door. It was still closed, still quiet. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A cart parked nearby. Not for cleaning, not for food. Files. Thin folders stacked neatly, each labeled with a name. I didn't stop. Didn't slow down. Just looked as I passed. Long enough to recognize one of them. E. Carver. Still here, still in the system. Not transferred. not gone. Just moved. That confirmed it. People didn't leave Ashcroft. They were reassigned, repositioned, out of sight. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened again. Footsteps, doors, the same rhythm as always. Only now I understood what it was hiding. I pulled the pages from my slipper and added one more line. Residents not leaving. They're being relocated internally. North Wing likely endpoint. I stared at that sentence longer than the others. Because once you see something clearly, you can't pretend it's smaller than it is. And this was bigger than my house. Bigger than my family. This place wasn't just holding people. It was processing them. And I had just been moved to the front of the line. By the 7th day, they stopped pretending I was temporary. It showed up in small ways first. My name tag changed. It used to say, Evaluation, in faint blue ink beneath it. Now it said, Resident, Permanent, quietly decided. No one told me. They never do. I noticed it when Molly brought fresh linens. You saw it, she said under her breath. Yes. They moved you on paper before they move you in person. That confirmed what I already suspected. They're accelerating, I replied. She didn't answer directly, just smoothed the blanket and added, You need to be careful today. That was enough. By afternoon, I understood why. They called me in again, not for medication this time. Administrative review, Caleb said, not meeting my eyes. The room was different. Larger, cleaner, a folder already waiting on the table. And Mrs. Nora Keene was there. She didn't sit right away. She stood by the window, hands folded, watching me like she was measuring something invisible. Mrs. Braddock, she said finally, her voice calm, almost gentle. We're concerned about your adjustment. I've been cooperative, I answered. Yes, she nodded. You have. But cooperation and stability aren't the same thing. That was deliberate. Martin used the same tone, same phrasing, same strategy. They were aligned. We've observed signs of agitation, she continued. Questioning staff, resisting treatment protocols. I asked what I was being given, I said. That's not your role here, she replied smoothly. There it was again. Not your role, not your place. She sat down then, folding her hands neatly on the table. We believe a more structured environment would benefit you. I didn't react. North Wing? I asked. That made her pause, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. Yes, she said. A quieter space. Fewer external stimuli. Fewer witnesses, I thought, but I didn't say it. Instead, I let my shoulders drop slightly, let my gaze soften, let them see what they expected to see. Fatigue, uncertainty, compliance. If you think it's best, I murmured. That did it. Keene relaxed. Caleb's pen froze for half a second before continuing. They believed it. Good. They didn't move me immediately. That's how these places work. They prepare first, reassign staff, adjust records, create the version of events they need before anything physical happens. That gave me a window, a small one, but enough. That evening, Joan found me before dinner. She didn't speak until we were alone in the kitchen. The capsule, she said quietly. Sedative, stronger than what they list. I nodded. I didn't take it. Good, she replied, then added, they use it before transfers. Makes people easier to move. Of course they do. Thank you, Joan. She gave a short nod. You didn't hear it from me. When I stepped back into the hallway, June was waiting near the window. You're being moved, she said, without turning. Yes. She looked at me then. For the first time, there was something close to urgency in her eyes. "Once you go there," she said, "you don't come back the same." "I'm not planning to stay," I answered. That almost made her smile. Almost. Back in my room, I didn't sit, didn't hesitate. I pulled everything out. Pages, notes, pills, names, laid them across the bed in order. Not as memories, as evidence. I rewrote what mattered most in smaller script, condensed, sharper, harder to dismiss. Pre-admission legal coordination confirmed. Medication manipulation verified. Resident displacement internal, not external. North Wing Tara containment stage. I folded the pages tighter this time, smaller, easier to hide. Then I slipped them into a new place. Not the slipper. Too predictable now. Instead, inside the hem of my nightgown. Sewn just enough with thread I pulled from the lining. They could take everything else. Not that. Before lights out, I stood by the door and listened. Same footsteps. Same rhythm. Only now I could hear something underneath it. Preparation, movement. Doors opening where they usually stayed closed. They were getting ready. So was I. I returned to the bed, lay down slowly, and closed my eyes. Not to sleep. To wait. Because the next time they came for me, I wouldn't resist. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't give them anything they could write down. I would go exactly where they wanted me, and I would take everything I knew with me. Into the one place they thought no one ever came back from. They came for me after lights out. No announcement, no explanation. Just the soft click of the door and two silhouettes against the hallway light. "Miriam," one of them started, then corrected herself. "Mrs. Braddock." "We're relocating you." Relocating. Such a clean word. I sat up slowly, like it took effort. Let my movements drag just enough to look believable. Molly wasn't there. Different staff. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't meant to be witnessed. "Now?" I asked quietly. "It's better this way," the man said. Not unkind. Just rehearsed. I nodded. No resistance, no questions. That's what they wanted. I slipped my feet into my slippers, empty now, and stood, steady enough not to raise suspicion, unsteady enough to fit their story. The hallway was darker than usual. Fewer lights, fewer doors open. As we walked, I counted steps out of habit. 12 to the turn, 7 to the service corridor. Then the air changed. Colder, cleaner, quieter. North Wing. The door didn't scrape like the others. It opened smoothly, maintained better, used less. Inside, the difference was immediate. No television noise, no murmured conversations. Just silence, and the faint hum of something mechanical behind the walls. The rooms here had narrower windows, higher up, harder to see out of. "Temporary observation?" the woman said, opening a door. Of course it was. I stepped inside without hesitation. The room was almost empty. Bed, chair. No personal items. No drawers worth checking. They expected compliance. I gave it to them. I sat. They lingered just long enough to be sure I wouldn't stand back up. Then the door closed. Click. Same sound, different meaning. I didn't move right away. I listened first. Footsteps fading. One set lingered longer outside. Guarding or just cautious, I couldn't tell. Then even that disappeared. Only when the silence settled did I reach for the hem of my nightgown. Still there. The pages hadn't shifted. Good. I pulled one free carefully, just enough to reread the key lines in the dim light. North Wing, sheer containment stage. Yes. Now I could confirm it. Time passed differently in that room. No clock, no voices, no routine to anchor it. But I tracked what I could. Meals came late. No interaction. Just a tray slid in, door closed again before I could even look up properly. The food was softer here, easier to eat, easier to drug. I didn't touch the drink, not once. At some point, hours maybe, I heard something. Not from the hallway, from the wall. A faint tapping, irregular, not pipes. I moved closer, slow, quiet. Tapped back once. Silence. Then 2 taps. Pause. 3. Someone else was here. Alive. Aware. Not gone. I returned to the bed and sat down, letting that settle in. They hadn't removed people. They'd buried them inside the system. Out of sight. Out of reach. But not out of existence. I pulled the page free again and added one more line, writing smaller than before. North wing occupied, others present, communication possible. I paused, then underlined it once, because that changed everything. This wasn't the end of the line. It was the part they thought no one could map. And now, I was inside it. The tapping didn't stop. It came and went, irregular at first, like someone testing whether I would answer again. I didn't rush it. That's the mistake people make. They treat contact like rescue. It isn't. Not yet. I waited. Then I tapped once. Pause. 2 taps back. This time, faster. Pattern. I shifted closer to the wall, pressing my ear lightly against the cold surface. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. Nothing. Then, 3 taps. Pause. 1. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone was trying to communicate without being heard. I spent the next hour mapping it. Simple responses at first. 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 to repeat. Primitive, but effective. Eventually, I asked the question that mattered. "Are there others?" Tap, tap. Yes. My fingers tightened slightly against the wall. "How many?" Pause. Then 4 taps. At least 4. In this wing alone, not transferred, not gone, contained. That changed the scale of everything. This wasn't about isolating individuals. It was about processing them in groups, quietly, efficiently. Later, if it was later, time had no edges here. The door opened again. Same quiet motion, same controlled presence. A tray slid in. This time, the man didn't leave immediately. He stood there a moment longer than necessary, watching, waiting, testing. "Did you sleep?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Yes." "Good," he said. "You'll feel better once the adjustment settles." Adjustment. Always that word. I kept my expression soft, unfocused, gave him exactly what he expected to see. "Am I staying here?" I asked. "For now," he replied. "Until you're stable." Stable meant silent, manageable, unquestioning. I lowered my gaze like the conversation had already slipped from me. He left. As soon as the door closed, I moved. Not to the food, to the wall, 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps back. Still there? Good. That night, the tapping changed. Faster, more urgent. I leaned in again. Tap, 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 pause, tap, pause, tap, tap. It took me a moment. Then I understood. Not a conversation, a warning, footsteps, not the usual pattern, more than 2, moving quickly but not running, stopping at doors. Keys, metal against metal. I stepped back from the wall just as mine opened. 2 staff this time, not the same as before. And behind them, Mrs. Keene. She didn't step inside. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the doorway. "Mrs. Braddock," she said calmly, "we're conducting a routine check." Routine. At night, in North Wing, of course. I stayed seated, didn't move, didn't speak. Let them look. The bed, the tray, the walls. One of them stepped closer, scanning the room. Too close, too thorough. I could feel it. This wasn't random. They were checking for something, or someone, or signs of both. Keen's eyes settled on me, longer than before, measuring. Again, always measuring. "You're adapting quickly," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "Am I?" I murmured. She smiled. Not kindly. Faster than most. That wasn't a compliment. That was suspicion. They left without another word. Door closed, lock engaged. Footsteps moved on. Next room, then the next. I waited. Counted. Listened. Only when the silence returned did I move back to the wall. One tap. Pause. No response. Again. Nothing. I sat there longer than I should have. Still. Listening. Waiting. But the tapping didn't come back. Slowly, I reached for the hidden pages and pulled one free. My hand was steady, but the line I wrote cut deeper than the others. Night inspection triggered after communication. Pattern detected. Risk increased. I paused, then added, others still present, but not all will remain. I folded the page smaller than before, tighter, more precise. Because now I understood something new. This place didn't just remove people quietly. It reacted when it thought it was being observed. And I had just made myself visible. This is the moment I'd be seriously worried. She made contact, and the system answered back. Not directly, but fast enough to notice. What would you do here? Keep pushing or go quiet? Me? I'd probably slow down, disappear a little, then hit back when they stop watching. The tapping didn't return that night, and that told me more than if it had. By morning, if it was morning, the light here barely changed. The hallway felt different again. Not louder, not busier, just tighter. Like something had already happened and no one was going to say it out loud. When the door opened, it wasn't the same man. This one was older, broader shoulders, slower movements. He placed the tray down without looking at me, then stayed. Too long. "They'll be reviewing your status today," he said. I didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "Am I improving?" That was the word they liked. He glanced at me for the first time. "That depends," he said, "on how cooperative you continue to be." Translation, on how quiet you stay. I nodded. He left. I didn't go to the wall immediately. I waited, listened, counted. No tapping, no signal, nothing. That absence settled into something colder than fear, because silence here didn't mean safety. It meant removal. When I finally moved, I didn't tap. I placed my hand flat against the wall instead, still cold, still solid, still hiding something I couldn't reach anymore. Whoever had been there wasn't answering. I went back to the bed and pulled the page free again. Contact lost after inspection. Possible removal. Timing, 12 hours. I stared at that line longer than the others, because now I wasn't just documenting. I was tracking loss. Midday, judging by the timing of the second tray, they came again. 3 of them this time. And Mrs. Keen. Always Mrs. Keen when something important was about to happen. "Mrs. Braddock," she said, stepping inside without waiting. "We've reviewed your case." "Of course you have." I stayed seated, calm, quiet. "Your responsiveness has improved," she continued. "You're following guidance. That's encouraging." Encouraging meant useful. "We're considering adjusting your placement." Not releasing, adjusting. "Will I go home?" I asked, soft enough to sound uncertain. A pause. Then, "That depends on your continued progress." A lie so polished it almost sounded like truth. I nodded slowly, lowering my gaze again, letting them see compliance, letting them believe it. But something had changed. I could feel it in the way Keen watched me, longer, closer, like she was trying to decide something. Not about my condition, about my risk. "Have you had any Unusual experiences? She asked. There it was. Careful, indirect, but targeted. I blinked once, let confusion show, just enough. Like what? She held my gaze. Sounds, disturbances, anything out of the ordinary. The wall, the tapping, the contact, they knew something, not everything, but enough to ask. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. It's been very quiet. That was the right answer. I saw it in her shoulders, in the way her expression softened just slightly. Relief, or maybe recalculation. They didn't stay much longer. No paperwork this time, no pills, just observation, assessment. Then they left again. As soon as the door closed, I stood. Faster than before, not careless, but not slow either, because now I knew something else. They were checking for communication, and they didn't find it, which meant I still had the advantage. I moved to the wall, waited, then tapped once. Soft, careful, nothing. Again, still nothing. I stepped back, not surprised, but not ignoring it either, because whoever had been there was gone. I returned to the bed and sat down, pulled the pages out again, reread everything, names, times, patterns. Then I added a new line. System reacts within hours. Detection, inspection, removal. I underlined it once, then added, no direct proof left behind, only absence. I folded the pages tighter, more compact, more deliberate. Because now the situation was clear. This place didn't just control people. It erased connections. Fast enough that no one could build anything solid. No alliances, no structure, no resistance. I leaned back against the wall again, closed my eyes, not to rest, to think. Because pushing blindly now would get me the same result. Silence. Removal. Gone. So I adjusted. Same as they did. Same as I always had. I wouldn't reach out again. Not yet. Not the same way. Not through something they were already watching. If this place erased contact, then I would have to create it somewhere else. Somewhere they didn't expect. And this time, I wouldn't test the wall. I would test the people watching it. They didn't come for me that night. That was new. After everything I had seen, the speed, the timing, the quiet removals, I expected escalation. Another inspection. Another shift. Something. But nothing came. And that told me something even more dangerous. They were waiting. The next morning, the door opened without warning. No tray, no nurse, just Caleb. Alone. That alone was wrong. He stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind him just enough to muffle the hallway, but not enough to lock it. "You don't have much time," he said. No hesitation this time. No fear in his voice, just urgency. I stood. "What happened to the others?" His jaw tightened. They were moved out, not discharged, not transferred on record, just gone. Same pattern, faster now. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Because they're about to finalize your file," he said. "Full guardianship, property clearance. Once that's signed, you're not leaving, not even on paper." I already knew that, but hearing it out loud changed the weight of it. "Who signs it?" I asked. "Graham Wexler. Your niece already approved everything. They just need your non-resistance on record to justify it." Non-resistance. They didn't need consent anymore. Just silence. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I pulled something from the system," he said. "You need to see it." He handed me a folded printout. Different from the last one. More detailed. Internal notes. I opened it. Case: Eleanor Braddock. Status: non-resistant subject. Cognitive classification: declining. Reinforced guardianship approval. Pending final confirmation. Property transfer pathway. Active. My eyes moved lower. Contingency. Long-term internal placement if external complications arise. That wasn't care. That was containment planning. They're not planning for you to leave, Caleb said. I know. They're planning for what happens if someone asks about you. That was worse. Because that meant they expected questions. Eventually. And they already had answers prepared. I folded the paper slowly. Why help me? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, because I've seen this before, he said, and no one ever walks out once it's signed. That was enough. Then we don't let them sign it, I said. He shook his head. You can't stop it from here. Then we don't fight from here. That made him pause. Finally, he was starting to understand. Who sees these records? I asked. Administration, legal, and, he hesitated. County oversight, but only if something triggers it. What triggers it? Formal complaint? External report? Something official? Good. That was a door. Can you get something out? I asked. His eyes narrowed slightly. What? Copies, notes, names. Enough to make someone look twice. That's risky. So is staying quiet. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. I can try. Don't try, I said calmly. Do it once, correctly. That landed. Footsteps in the hallway. Closer. He stepped back immediately. I'll come tonight, he said under his breath. If I can. Then he was gone. Door closing just as the tray arrived. Perfect timing. Too perfect. I sat back down slowly, letting my body relax again into the role they expected. Quiet. Passive. Manageable. But inside, everything had shifted. This was no longer about documenting patterns or surviving North Wing. This was about breaking the system before it finished closing. I pulled the hidden pages free and added the most important entry yet. Guardianship imminent. System preparing external justification. Window of intervention, Chatru minimal. I paused. Then wrote one final line beneath it. Next move must leave the building, because if it stayed inside, it would disappear, just like the others. And this time, I wasn't going to let that happen. Caleb didn't come that night. At first, I thought he'd been stopped, or worse, noticed. In a place like this, absence always meant something. It was never neutral. But then the door opened. Not quietly this time, not controlled. Two men I hadn't seen before stepped in, followed by Mrs. Keene. And behind her, someone else. A woman in a dark coat, holding a thin leather folder. Not staff, not family, something official. Mrs. Braddock, Keene said, too composed, too precise. We have a few final confirmations to complete. Final. That word settled heavier than the rest. I stayed seated, calm, waiting. The woman stepped forward, opening her folder. My name is Maribel Hush, County Oversight. I just need to verify a few details before we proceed. That wasn't part of their plan. I saw it in Keene's shoulders. Tension, small but real. Something had shifted. Do you understand where you are? Maribel asked. Yes, I said. Do you feel safe here? I paused. Not long, just enough. Then, I feel observed. The room changed, subtly, but enough. Maribel's pen slowed. Observed how? She asked. Keene stepped in. Mrs. Braddock has shown signs of... Maribel lifted a hand. Let her answer. Silence. Clean, sharp. I looked directly at her. People disappear, I said. Records don't match what happens. And decisions about my home were made before I arrived. Keene didn't interrupt. That was the first real sign of trouble. Maribel's eyes didn't leave mine. Do you have anything to support that? Yes. I reached for the hem of my nightgown. Slow, careful, every movement visible. No sudden gestures. No reason to stop me. I pulled the folded pages free, set them on the table. Caleb chose that moment. The door opened again, too fast, too unplanned, and he stepped in, breathing slightly harder than usual. I have copies, he said. No hesitation now, no fear. Just commitment. He placed a stack of printed sheets beside mine. System logs, timestamps, internal notes, everything they thought no one would connect. Keene moved then. Too late. Those documents are unauthorized. They're relevant, Maribel said calmly. And just like that, control shifted. The room didn't get louder. It got still. The kind of stillness that happens right before something breaks. Maribel began reading. Slowly, carefully, not rushing. That was the worst part for them. Because nothing here was built to survive attention. Minutes passed. No one spoke. Not Keene, not the staff, not even Caleb. Then Maribel closed the folder. Mrs. Keene, she said, I'll need access to all internal records for this wing, immediately. Keene didn't answer right away, and in that hesitation, everything collapsed. They didn't take me back to the same room after that. Not North Wing. Not even the original one. They moved me to a temporary office while the building filled with people who didn't belong to Ashcroft. Voices changed, footsteps changed, the rhythm broke. By morning, Paige arrived. Alone, for the first time. No Martin, no Blake, just her. She stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I remembered. Ellie, she started. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. I didn't know it would go like this, she said. That wasn't an apology. That was distance. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see family. I saw someone who made a decision and followed it until it broke. You knew enough, I said. She swallowed, didn't argue. I can fix this, she said quickly. We can reverse. No, I replied. Simple, final. That was the moment it ended. Not with shouting, not with revenge, just a line, drawn clean. I didn't go back to Alderwick Lane, not right away. The house was placed under independent review, the accounts locked. Everything paused until the investigation finished. Instead, they gave me a small temporary apartment above a library 2 towns over. Quiet, real quiet. Not the kind that hides things, the kind that lets you hear yourself think. A week later, I bought a new notebook. Not for recipes this time, for records. The first line I wrote was simple. I was not confused. I was documented. I'll be honest. I don't fully agree with her. She stopped clean, walked away, drew the line. But me, I would have gone further. Paige wouldn't get a quiet exit from me. Not after that. But tell me what you think. Would you have done the same? Or finished it differently? And if you've made it this far, subscribe, like the video, and write "documented" in the comments so I know you stayed till the end.